Uh, Hello and welcome to the initial broadcast, the first attempt of 33rd County, the podcast about why being Irish American is deeply, deeply fucked, and being Irish is only slightly deeply less fucked. With me, I have my co-host Tom. Tom, say hi.
Hi, everyone. That's a real Irish accent right there.
Yeah, it's that we were going to call this inscrutable accents because we're probably going to have to put this out on a YouTube in order to get the subtitles out. But other than that, the call of Megachusetts has become so strong that people have decided that they need more Boston content, and really they need more Megachusetts content, and specifically the other 32 counties of Megachusetts, which are of course the Republic of Ireland.
Exactly. And I feel like being from Megachusetts is like being a pogue for being Irish. Never fully deployed, but you still believe you're a troop.
But yeah, so the idea here is that I'm going to expose Tom to some of the most cursed aspects of being an Irish American, and in return, Tom is going to tell me how absolutely fucked we all are here, and why we're all a bunch of plastic patties who really deserve like a firm, fucking kick in the ass deep into the North Atlantic. And in exchange, Tom is going to teach me about the old country. And I don't know, I guess.
Oh, fuck you. Do not call it the old country. Fuck you. There is no motherland for you to come home to.
Well, I mean, Lord knows I have a lot of friends who are currently trying more and more each year. Unfortunately, lucky for you, my family's a little bit too far into, dug deep into America to be able to get my citizenship back. So you won't have me to kick around, but I'm going to send I'm going to cast about the bars of Boston and convince everyone to get their citizenship, just to, send them over and, send the best examples back to the country, back to Ireland.
Yeah, do a flyer campaign where a million hate breed fans all arrive in Dublin airport. Really being Irish American is just admitting that your family were too weak to survive the famine.
I mean, I was recently just passing around a flyer at the Hatebreed show that I was at last weekend, just encouraging everyone to show up at the consular offices and just show up, present themselves, show their Celtic knot tattoo, and just as proof of citizenship, and just ask for their passport right then and there.
I mean, you could really definitely sell some like Boston hardcore fans on, if you're Irish American, you claim to repatriate, you get like a free pair of cargo shorts and a shaved head at Dublin Airport rather than like a flat cap and a pair of like tweed suits.
Yeah, no, it's actually you get a Kangol hat and I'll shave your head at the airport and slap your ass on the way off.
Oh no, I was going to ask, Shocks, do you want to try and define what it means to be Irish American?
See, and I think that's the question that we're going to go after here. And I'm certainly excited to find out, after our viewing in our initial episode, if you have any answers about what you think being an Irish American is. I mean, I could say that it's a deeply, deeply dumb thing, is really what I have to say that it is. Like, it's this half-remembered concept of what you think it means to be from a place. That's really something that's been filtered through so many times you don't even remember that it's there anymore. And I get, and so it's wearing a scally cap in Boston because it's what you've seen your uncles and your brothers and your cousins and everyone else do. And having this vague idea that, you're supposed to, like bagpipes, I guess, and, maybe support the IRA. But really, and then, there's kind of the historical idea of what it means to be Irish American, which is, I suppose, being a Kennedy and, possibly drowning your babysitter in a, bog somewhere down Martha's Vineyard.
And lobotomizing your family members and sticking them in the attic.
Yeah, and over and to the left. But beyond that, it's a weird thing. And in particular, I mean, one of the things that's, always weird about it is that having an ethnic identity is something that white people in America broadly really love to do. Everyone likes to be, German and Italian and Irish and Scottish and a bunch of other things way more than they actually like to, just be a mud American. I remember in particular, I know at least in the Massachusetts school system in 5th grade, you do like the Ellis Island project, and everyone has to go through and, research your various different, ethnic identities, but it's Massachusetts and you're in a, mostly white suburban town. So everyone is just like a vaguely different combination of like Irish and English.
And, it's funny because, like, a lot of people would say that people in the motherland, in Ireland, like, really hate Irish Americans. And it's not, for most of us, it's not that we hate Irish Americans. They're fine when they're in America. The problem is when they come to Ireland. And like you said, their idea of what Ireland is frozen in time from whenever their like grandfather or grandmother got on the boat and like fucked off over the Atlantic. And they think that they're going to come back and it's going to be like what it was between, variously between 1845 and like 1960.
I was going to say.
And it's going to be either everyone is like eating grass on the side of the road, or they're, running around with no shoes on in Dublin and stealing coal and fighting the Brits. Those days are long, long gone. We're still fighting the Brits, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I guess that's kind of what it is. It's almost like, running Ireland through a photocopier about 50 times, and, kind of the image you're left with on the other side. And that's kind of how I generally view kind of the Irish American thing. And to be clear, we've talked about this, but, like I grew up in like the punk scene in Boston, and like, I have like, part of the reason of that I kind of got to who I am today is, going to see like a Mighty Mighty Boston show when I was, like, I think was it like 13 years old. And one of the bands playing at that time, two of the bands playing that were opening up for them were Flogging Molly and then the Dropkick Murphys. And this was before either band had gotten nearly as big as they are now. But I remember, sitting there, and there's, all these like old time Boston skinhead dudes, and they're all like have, fucking Irish flags on their flight jackets, and they're all, wearing, their like wool scallies, and it's like, oh, this is my way of connecting to my culture. And kind of, and
bagpipes are not Irish, they're Scottish.
Right.
In Ireland, they're called uilleann pipes. You play them with your elbow.
So I don't know.
Someone said that like Jonathan Davis from Korn playing the bagpipes is Irish culture, and I'm like, I don't think like a meth tweaker from Bakersfield in California playing the bagpipes is particularly Irish culture.
Well, and of course, like, neither really is the Dropkick Murphys. Like, it's really like not an, it's a very specific retelling of kind of what you understand Irish culture to be. And so it's one of those, I don't know, it's, this very particular, in Boston in particular, it's this very particular kind of like, performative nationality, but it's one that only bears, as you say, like a tenuous connection to like anything fucking real. And I mean, like, so, and I guess getting to this, so I forced Tom to watch The Town as, kind of his, not that he has not seen it before, because of course, who doesn't respect Ben Affleck's entire oeuvre, and the greater Affleck cinematic universe, which includes the work of both Ben and Casey.
The Megachusetts cinematic universe, one would say.
Yeah, I mean, just really, kind of filling out the world. And this seemed to be kind of the touchstone for, a lot of things that we'll probably end up talking about. Should any of you, consider this, an interesting topic. But, so...
crime, illegitimate children... drinking in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Lots of tracksuits, a lot of great tracksuits.
Opiate use, bad tattoos, some light crime, a tenuous connection to any sort of, working your 12 steps, cops being about the same as the criminals involved, just a lot of, through themes that will kind of continue on from this point forward.
How do we start with The Town? Like, do you... maybe give me a background of just like Boston Irish guy culture, because later on in the movie they mention the different areas like Dorchester, Southie, and Charleston. How would you explain it to me?
So, and then this is all going to come with a caveat of the fact that, and this is something that gets glossed over a lot and is kind of one of the funnier parts about like Boston Irish dude culture, is that most, like Affleck himself, most Boston Irish dudes are not from Boston. Affleck and his brother aren't. They're originally from, I think they grew up in Cambridge. And, that's one of those kind of elements of it being like a very, I guess, parochial thing. A good way of kind of introducing the way that like Boston Irish culture is one of the famous questions that you get asked. If Dorchester is one of the It's one of the larger neighborhoods in Boston. Boston started out as kind of Boston proper. Over the course of the 1800s, it kind of gobbled up a lot of the smaller municipalities around it. Never to quite the extent that New York City did, but, kind of like a similar process, where, the Isle of Manhattan eventually took over Queens and Brooklyn and, but all these areas kind of still have their own separate identities. Dot being one, which is, a very large, ethnically diverse community. A lot of Vietnamese went there, refugees after the Vietnam War. Dominicans, fairly big, like Jamaica population. And, but one of the all-time, like, townie questions is what parish you from? Because specifically, even if you're from Dot, it's not important that you're just from Dot. It's important as to, what part of Dot you're from, and so what church you attended. And that is like that is the very specific townie question. And so, you have all of these kind of, vaguely Irish neighborhoods. Not so much anymore. I think even in the when Affleck was talking,
they're replacing us. They're replacing us. the proverbial they. It's the Italians. This is an Italian-American conspiracy to replace the Irish. Too long have they ruled.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness, too long did they rule? Because I think Mayor Menino was the mayor for about 20 years. Until we got a nice Irish boy like Martin J. Walsh as mayor of Boston. So, all was right and restored to the universe.
So, like, how do we start to, like, summarize this movie? Like, bank robbers from Charleston.
So I've been doing a lot of talking. I want to see, how would you summarize this movie? Because I want to see what things stuck out to you in particular. Because, I've seen this 1,000 times. I could probably, at a level where I can probably get offended at the individual, like, roots. And, I think I was telling you earlier that, I noticed in one of the scenes where the Yankees are supposed to play the next day that on the TV monitor they were playing the Blue Jays instead. So
this is the only thing that stops it from being a documentary. Like, I saw this movie like years ago, and it's like, it's fantastic. I think if you're watching it just as a movie, it's brilliant. If you enjoy like heist movies, crime movies, real classic of the genre, or modern classic, I would say. It has like all of the perfect heist movie elements mixed in with like absolute Boston dirtbag Irish elements. You got a love interest that comes in. Essentially what happens is Ben Affleck and his crew. It also features Jeremy Renner in an absolute world-class performance. Jeremy Renner, who is an absolute dirtbag in real life, allegedly.
Yeah. We can't start off with the libel slander. We got to work our way up to it.
Yeah, and funnily enough, the most Irish-looking guys in this entire movie are the other two guys in the crew, because the skinny guy looks exactly like one of my cousins. So, some epigenetics just doesn't get bred out. You still look like you grew up inhaling like airplane exhaust fumes in the southeast of Ireland. But essentially what happens is they knock off a bank and start the movie, and it sets up Ben Affleck, and like, he's the nice guy. He cares about the bank teller who has to unlock the safe because she's nervous, He's a nice guy. And then Jeremy Renner exposes one of his tattoos. She sees it. Whole movie sets off. Ben Affleck decides, I'm going to bang the bank manager. I don't want to disrespect this woman's position where she's gotten to in her career. She's a bank manager.
Yeah, please don't accidentally mansplain over the victims of crime.
Yes, exactly. We are centering voices. We are listening to Boston voices. We hear you. I'm going to start doing land acknowledgements for Boston, for where, individual like Irish Americans got sick on like certain corners, and where they like fought over, who got a new pair of shoes. But essentially what happens in this movie, Ben Affleck starts a relationship with the bank manager, and this back and forth. Jeremy Renner is like, we're fucked. How are you gonna do this? You better have a plan. She knows who I am because, and this is a great little bit of lore in the movie, Jeremy Renner has a fighting Irish leprechaun on the back of his neck. Great, terrible tattoo. If anyone is interested, I actually host a tattoo history podcast, which I'll plug at the end. And just terrible shit tattoo. And the whole thing hinges on, they do a couple of good bank jobs, and then they have to rob Fenway Park. And that's pretty much the movie. Blake Lively plays Ben Affleck's crackhead ex-girlfriend, who has a kid that he has to kind of raise his own, but isn't actually his kid. I feel like that's very Boston as well, which you can explain to me. And it's just like a lot of dudes rocking. And unfortunately, it comes to an end when the dudes stop rocking.
Yeah, and the dudes get shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's definitely like a couple like Blake Lively's character in particular, Ben Affleck's girlfriend through this is just absolute perfection as far as just like kind of like, like vaguely junky towny girlfriend. Just, like and even just the whole thing too with it's never really firmly established whether or not it's actually Ben Affleck's kid. He says that it isn't, but like there's really kind of like no one way or another. Ben Affleck's father in this, as like a life inmate at like down at Walpole is also just just like picture perfect. Slane is the fourth member of the gang, and the driver, who actually kind of reminds me of I can't remember the name of the character, but the driver in Snatch.
Fantastic movie.
Kind of like a similar energy where he's kind of like a little bit of like the kind of like big guy comic relief, but then at the end, like driving his EMS into a hail of FBI and SWAT team gunfire.
That's like the Boston version of a Viking funeral.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, driving a car into a hail of gunfire outside of Fenway Park is like really. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing is it's an interesting thing because it's at the, I would say, not at the very beginning of this kind of era of Boston movies, and it's interesting too because the whole, I don't know, the way that Boston was seen in kind of like a cinematic universe was really different, really up until maybe about Good Will Hunting. You kind of had. You had the Thomas Crown affair. You did have like the Friends of Eddie Coyle, which is like a very, kind of famous like 70s Boston crime movie, which kind of prefigures a lot of this. And, there were some callbacks to it. But, the image of Boston really up until kind of Good Will Hunting and then, the kind of like the Affleck cinematic universe was very much kind of, very Puritan, very kind of banned in Boston, just kind of, Protestant, like white person shit. And now it's just, and, so the kind of the focus on it being this, and, and part of it is because so much, I think, has become, like out on the West Coast, if you tell someone that you're Irish American or something, it kind of has a different connotation because, a lot of that kind of ethnic identity nonsense kind of got, left behind.
Yeah, it got washed away when the westward expansion.
Yeah, in the course of Manifest Destiny. And so this is kind of like a very specific, like Irish and American, the kind of Irish American thing is a very specific, I would call it even, kind of Midwest, Northeast, Rust Belt identity thing. That, is kind of creating this identity of not just, and going back to kind of trying to recreate what I think we see as the tribalism that we associate with kind of Europe.
Like one thing it does is obviously, all of these characters are all like fourth or fifth generation mix, but the fact that they all have a kind of distinct kind of parochial, like kind of towny aspect of them, it's all about like, oh, you're from like that part, or Titus Welliver's character where it's, he is from Charleston and like became a cop. It's like, you're a fucking snake, you're a traitor. But there's there's some fantastic scenes in this movie. Like, I think the bar scene at the start where Blake Lively is introduced has like the single saddest sex scene in cinematic history. Just hard cut from them talking to the bar, and it's just like 30 seconds of like the sweatiest coked up sex you've ever seen, and it's just absolutely fucking miserable. And I feel like very accurate to life.
Yeah, well, and then where she climbs off the couch afterwards, just puts on her clothes and leaves, and he's just still like, still with his head like on the back of the couch, just kind of like having that moment of like, fuck, like
what the fuck am I just after doing?
Like my ex just got me again. Like, God fucking damn it.
That's going to be another 18 years in alimony.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like just every aspect of it, like Ben Affleck. I mean, I think it's not supposed to be like a real Bruins track jacket, but the fact that, you always see him in some sort of sports apparel. I mean, like, particularly before 2004, when the Red Sox finally won the World Series after 86 years. Even at like hardcore and punk shows, like one of the things that other people used to tell me when they were from, coming from other places, you'd go to like a punk show and everyone would still be wearing like fucking like a Red Sox hat, which in comparison for the time, used to be like, considered like, like a jock thing, like like a, frat bros or like what, I don't know what the European equivalent would be.
It'd be kind of like, I suppose it would be kind of rugby guys, but the thing is that rugby guys in Europe are considered generally quite posh in like it's kind of like private school.
Yeah.
It's what wasps essentially want to be. But yeah, like the tracksuit thing that like Jeremy Renner wearing the Celtics tracksuit and like the Puma black and white tracksuit, just fantastic tracksuits in this movie throughout.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's part of it too. And I, kind of going back to the originating question that we have here, I think part of the Irish American thing is kind of reproducing what we understand to be kind of like the, not just the social structures, but the kind of class structures that we understand as seeing like, over from Europe. Because obviously too, with the social structures, I mean, a lot of this movie is, it's all about, kind of ideas of loyalty and identity and, betrayal and, just, morality, kind of amidst. And, so I think a lot of that is about reproducing, once again, like the way that we understand it. If you ground it in not just being, there's a reason why, like, the mafia, they don't just, see themselves as a criminal brotherhood within, America, but it's, something that they ground very heavily in these ideas of, Italy and this particular conception of Italy. And I feel like the Boston scumbag is like grounded in a particular conception of, like what
there is a line from John Hamm, like, I'm going to put an end to your fucking Irish omerta, or maybe it's from Titus Welliver's character, but it's like, I'm going to end your Irish omerta. And like, I think mentioning class is kind of a really interesting point that like when you contrast it with kind of Italian American crime movies, like it's a lot more, the Italian side is much more flash. They're kind of, they got a lot of gold, they got a lot of jewelry, they got nice shit, where like Ben Affleck's character is like a rock breaker,
Yeah.
And all the guys are like, oh, we install like security or electric or some shit like that. And you look at something like Goodfellas, it's a world apart.
Well, and I think that's very particular to, that is very particular to the kind of, that kind of ephemeral Boston Irish, a particular identity, and kind of, and just, kind of is an undercurrent that carries through, Red Sox, Yankees games or whatever else, and compared to like, the big glitz and glittering of New York City, Boston, there's kind of like this sense of always kind of, right or wrong, always punching above your own weight.
Yeah.
And this kind of idea that, like even through like the underworld and like the reality of the underworld in, Boston through the 60s and 70s and 80s and whatever, you always did have the mafia. And for a long time, the mafia was supreme, really up until, Billy Bulger got the FBI to eliminate them for him, or not Billy, sorry, Whitey. And, and then kind of, but there was this kind of like always like a chip on the shoulder, even if it's not actually there. And, and I think that really is something that, and part of that is definitely this kind of class aspect, but, this idea that, the rest of these guys are kind of this organized, this organization or whatever else.
Yeah.
And this is kind of just something where, we're all gangsters who just happen to share like an ethnic identity. But
yeah. There's no real like organizing structure to it,
right,
outside of the fact that they're all Irish Americans.
Right. And that's why I think you see these kind of less authentic attempts to bring it back to kind of the, to Ireland itself, because, if you're just a bunch of assholes who happen to, have vaguely Irish parentage, and you're all doing crime together, that's one thing. But if you can grind it and saying like, well, there's this ethnic bond and we're doing it with the way our grandfathers did or something, whatever else, then you're kind of creating, you're creating that originating, mythos, that's, kind of makes it seem like it has a higher purpose.
What we need to establish is the Irish American La Cosa Nostra, which I suppose we will probably do Gangs of New York maybe in the future if we look into this a bit more. But you know, there's some really, really iconic scenes in the movie. I think the best one is,
I need your help. I can't tell you what it is. You can never ask me about it later, and we're gonna hurt some people.
Whose car are we gonna take?
like, absolute Irish American excellence, like pure dirtbag shit. And like, I think, you know, if you're from Boston, or if you just like hardcore, I feel like the two of us are going to talk a lot about hardcore just in general, because there is like a big kind of Irish American aspect to it. We mentioned like Flogging Molly and Dropkick Murphys and stuff, but that is like, they rock into the dude's house because he was harassing the bank manager. Her name's Claire, and they just like kick the shit out of him wearing hockey masks. Obviously, being very true to form, Ben Affleck's character Doug used to be, you know, a hockey prospect as well, but he got fucked out because he robbed a place with a nail gun.
Well, and even the you know, the line at the beginning of that where they call a sledgehammer the townie credit card, because that's how they're gonna get in through the front door. You know, like they knock on it, and then as soon as he unbolts it and just has the chain, they just knock it in on him.
There's a lot really to be said for, you know, like, actually, I kind of want to ask, how really authentic is it to like your interaction with guys who say they might be playing?
What do you mean?
Essentially, like, say like Jeremy Renner's character, I'm sure there's like dudes who run around who are pretty much like him, but you know, how common is it pretty much?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I will say, and you know, I'm gonna, you know, as I kind of preface all, like, I grew up around Boston. I'm not, you know, from any of these neighborhoods, and I only preface that
stolen valor.
I do have a lot of, well, you know, so I do actually have a lot of friends that I, you know, grew up in the punk scene with from South Boston. And so I've always been very careful to not, you know, try to actually steal Southie valor, because, you know, I wouldn't want to accidentally disrespect my friends in that way. But, I mean, when they were making this movie, they even said that, you know, it's because it's based on a book. I think the book was called Prince of Thieves. And at the time that they were making the movie, this was, you know, many years after the book itself had come out. And to some extent, it does describe a Boston that no longer exists, even in Charlestown. I mean, so much of Southeast, so much of Charlestown, even Dot now, has been gentrified in a way that, you know, makes a lot of the city almost unrecognizable compared to, you know, what it would have been. As few people seem to realize that actually South Boston has actually gotten whiter over time as it's gotten richer, which is kind of funny because, you know, if you would listen to folks, you would think that it's a more diverse neighborhood now that we're, you know, 50 years removed from busing. But that isn't actually the case. But these guys, I mean,
Boston is no longer busing.
Yeah.
No longer busing.
No longer the bussy. But yeah, I don't know. These guys are still out here, you know, and I mean, in different ways. I remember even just, you know, like, when I used to live in the Polish Triangle, you know, seeing like the, wannabe gangster kid who lived down the way, you know, jump up on the hood of a Cadillac in the middle of the day and start like breaking, the windshield, with his work boots, you know, and I know, you know, I mean, I know a few bars around where I knew I was accepted as a regular because it meant that the owner would take out his little black book and, take bets in front of me, you know, I mean, so that kind of, you know, those things are out there. There are, you know, still kind of wise guys around in the, you know, both in the Irish way and the Italian way, but it's definitely a lot less common than it used to be. And it's, you know, and it's kind of interesting because now, you know, you're kind of even getting a third step removed. I mean, if, you know, the prototypical Irish scumbag guy is kind of a copy of what they understand, you know, a similar figure, you know, their version of being a you know, kind of vaguely, you know, scummy, like, you know, IRA foot soldier maybe in the 70s. Now you kind of get, you know, sales managers who are moving to Southie, you know, after completing college, who are trying to act like they understand Ben Affleck acting in the town because that's what they understand, you know, and it's kind of, so it's just kind of the transitive property of Irishness.
It's funny you mentioned that as well, because obviously, you know, Ben Affleck has like a fantastic Carhartt jacket on, and I'm pretty sure like now there is dudes who work for like Salesforce or, you know, are lawyers who are rocking around in like a Carhartt jacket that they would have bought off, you know, someone who is like Ben Affleck's character, you know, pre-distressed so they can look like a proper, hard dude.
It's actually funny. I don't know if Carhartt does this yet, but I know there's a workwear company that recently relocated my hometown, and they actually sell like return distressed stuff that's not too damaged. Which I never thought about it that way before, but now I suddenly understand the target market.
It's sales execs who live in Southie.
Yeah, I mean it really is. I mean it's a different thing. And I'm even Charlestown too. I mean it's different. Everyone suddenly realized that there were these enclaves that were actually pretty fucking close to the city that they could move into and buy a house in, and so everything went from I joke with one of my friends that instead of going to college 20 years ago, I should have bought a triple decker and I would be a millionaire by now.
Yeah, but see, I think I got a drop for this.
Jeez, what the fuck is it with you guys in Charlestown? Don't they teach you how to read? Come on, let's go. There's things here. Read them.
I don't want to read that. This shit. It doesn't sound.
I'm not asking. It's not a choice. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Read the page.
I'm trying to
please.
make the shit sound fucking authentic. You got it all fucked up.
Authent what?
Yeah, see, they're just trying to be authenticious,
That's at some point too, I'll make you watch Boondock Saints, and you can learn some additional words that have been created because of Boston Irish cinema, like symbology. That's another great one there.
But see, there is, a really interesting counterpoint to the Charlestown kind of like hard dudes that, Renner and Affleck are playing, and that's Pete Postlethwaite's character, who's supposed to be obviously someone who is an Irish immigrant directly having come from what I assume would be Northern Ireland, although his accent is fucking all over the place. I have a clip pulled out I'm going to play in a second, and from my research that I had done way back into Irish involvement in crime in the US, is that there is always kind of an intermediary, particularly with Irish groups that are involved in crime, and a kind of arbiter who is like someone from the old country that has, is kind of a fixer. And ironically, Titus Williver is that in Sons of Anarchy as well. He's part of the IRA in Sons of Anarchy. So we got a lot of old world guys. But the thing that I found really interesting, because like Pete Postlethwaite is like a really esteemed like character actor. He's been on stage, he's been in loads of movies, and he's played a lot of Irish characters, a lot of characters from all over the world. But for some reason, he's trying to do an impression of Jerry Adams in this movie. And a really bad one at that.
Who knew he was actually the one doing the Jerry Adams for the BBC for the last 30 years?
Let me tell you now, Boston, Massachusetts will be reunited with the United Republic. A United Ireland includes Massachusetts. But here we're going to have... Bear that in mind, because that is a somewhat accurate rendition of Jerry Adams. Here is Pete Postlethwaite's Fergie character.
You're going to do this for me, or I'm going to clip your nuts. Like I clip your daddies.
It's funny because with that diction, all I can imagine is Obama saying that. Like
Obama, do you know about the Barack Obama Plaza in Ireland?
I've heard tell because I remember when he went over there and haha, like Barack Obama and that sort of shit.
But like, there's this giant. It's like what would be a truck stop in the US. We don't really have them. Ireland isn't a big enough country to really justify them.
Right.
But this place is like fucking massive. It has like our Irish version of Burger King, loads of like stores and everything, and it's called the Barack Obama Plaza, and it's in the middle of fucking nowhere where his family is allegedly from. And I say allegedly, not in the like Trump way that like, oh, he was born in Africa, like in the way that I would doubt any Irish American whose family has been out of there for more than 100 years to actually trace where the family is from. JFK, funny enough for anyone listening, is from my hometown, unfortunately.
Oh, he's from Brookline, Massachusetts. No.
Well, fuck you, Shocks.
No, I mean, that's an entirely separate episode, I think, even by itself, is, like the way that, Americans, oh, I'm from county, whatever. Like, at some point, I know I talked about it with my uncle, my grandfather was a red-haired Irish potato wholesaler on Long Island for 70 years. Like the shit runs, it's just like real stereotypical shit.
Yeah.
But like, and I know that people in my family have done the genealogical research about, oh, we're from that, descended from this county. This is the person who went over. But it's never retained it. And I think part of the reason is because I can't imagine, the couple times I've been over to Ireland, I've never once felt compelled to say, oh, actually, my family was original. Like, that's a fucking 150 years ago, man. Like, no one, I know nobody gives a shit, like, and, it's, like, I've met people who, like, lived in houses I lived in before and told them I used to live there and they don't look that interested. I can't imagine if you're saying, like, my ancestor came here fucking 150 years ago. Like,
fucking send them back, get back on the coffin ship. But funnily enough, Ben Affleck is the biggest representation of Irish culture for young men now, because in Dublin, there's this thing called the English language visa, and there's loads of English language schools. So we get a lot of people from South and Central America coming over to learn English.
Oh yeah, we get the same thing here, except it's especially Chinese students coming to Boston, because it's essentially a way to, at least as it was explained to me, it's a way to get a student visa without actually really having to go to school. At least that's how it works here.
But yeah, so like now there's like loads of people from particularly Brazil, like a lot of Brazilians in Dublin. So Ben Affleck in his real life is actually really representative of, in Ireland, particularly Dublin, now loving Latinas. He was just ahead of the curve. He's 20 years ahead. Ben Affleck, it's just, the Predator handshake meme, Ben Affleck, Irish men, big booty Latinas.
Yeah, I mean, apparently this is a sort of cross-cultural exchange that we can actually all agree on.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is kind of funny that, yeah, like, there is always that kind of like character of the old school Irish guy who ends up being the arbiter. And once again, I feel like that's almost just like something out of like mafia movies. You know what I mean? There's always like the one old guy. And I mean, I think it's also, once again, it's just kind of that appeal to authenticity. And I guess the thing that I would kind of link it to, speaking of like, going back to like hardcores, I don't know if you've seen the same thing over, like on your end, but I know like over the course of the past 10 years, you've seen more and more like hardcore frontmen who start like acoustic folk projects because,
100%.
And it's the same thing where they're kind of, they get to the very edge of like however fucking heavy they can be and how like sick the fucking breakdown can be. And then like they're looking for something, that authenticious. And so they, they start, they start a fucking folk band. It's the same thing, but with Glocks.
Yeah, you either become like a folk singer, like folk outlaw country singer, you end up being like a psychobilly guy in your like 40s, or funny enough, I was listening to Ceremony before we were recording.
Yeah.
You end up becoming a new wave band like Ceremony.
Yeah, but in fairness, In the Spirit World now is fucking sick.
Yes, true. Listen to Ceremony, they're fucking sick band. Listen to Violence, and The L-Shaped Man. Is that the name of that album?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Google it and pretend we gave you the answer.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, also, funnily enough, another underrated and someone that isn't publicly not acknowledged as Irish American excellence is John Hamm. John Hamm is in this movie, another Irish American guy. Funny enough, if you don't know about John Hamm got charged for grievous bodily harm in college through hazing after he lit someone on fire.
Yeah, was it somewhere down south? But like, I think he pled out to it. He like, didn't end up actually getting convicted, but every so often it's one of those things that it's kind of like how every so often, someone watching Ferris Bueller realizes Matthew Broderick killed someone in Ireland with a car around the same time.
But yeah, like John Hamm, also it's good that you're a lawyer and the fact that you can protect us from any libel claims. It's the internet, we'll be fine. But yeah, I suppose like we should probably talk about what happens at the end of the movie, because like the Fenway Park sequence is brilliant. Like we were talking about this earlier, that everyone kind of apart from Jeremy Renner's accent is really all over the place throughout this movie, and the only time Ben Affleck really sticks on like a hard accent is when he's dressed up as the cop and he's telling people, the Lindas want you to come home. Yeah.
But there is that scene beforehand where he first takes the hostages, and Jeremy Renner and Affleck are walking down the hallway, and they also, I mean, there is a lot of great towny casting in this, just as kind of like the extras. I mean, Slane is the fourth member of the crew, is one. I mean, he's been a. I mean, you were saying earlier we need to have an Irish version of La Cosa Nostra, and the Slane's longtime kind of rap supergroup is La Coca Nostra. Loosely translated as this dope thing of ours. And there's also the henchman that you see and is also just like some. He's just like
that's Fergie's henchman. He has the tattoo on him on his forearm.
Yeah, he has a tattoo of Massachusetts with his zip code on it, 02129.
And as far as I've been told, he just like the casting director saw him and was like, he has to be in the movie. His daughter went to audition for an extra role and he brought her to the audition and they were like, we need this guy.
Yeah, no, 100%. He's just like, he's a longshoreman, like a long time, like retired longshoreman. And similarly, the guy that they get to let him in into Fenway, I forget what his backstory is, but like also just a great example of a towny dude who just like, you know, opens up the thing, sees Affleck and Renner there with like, you know, their fake cop uniforms and their, you know, their bags full of guns and shit, and officer, and just like lets him in and then just like, all right, I don't know fucking nothing, and just, you know, like wanders off and, you know, whatever, Fenway. But when he
and during the second raid as well, there's that cop when they get out of the car that just like looks at them. They kind of look at him and he just turns his head and then they run off.
Yeah, which is also like, I'll blank out some of the details because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But I was at a party years ago with a bunch of friends of mine, including you know, this is, you know, long enough ago that one of the friends was under 18, and you know, but we're all sitting in the back and we're, you know, we're drinking and we're, you know, whatever, and he's and this one kid is like smoking some weed, and there's this one other guy out on the porch with us who you know, none of us know. He's just kind of nursing a beer. And so, you know, we start, you know, someone starts making small talk. Hey, how you doing? You know, whatever. Like, so what do you do? And the guy just like, you know, looks at all of us and just deadpans. He's like, I'm a cop. And like, and I remember because I was looking at my friend's face and his eyes just lit up like fucking dinner plates. Cause he just like, he has like, he's underage. He has like a beer bottle in his hand. He has a joint in the other hand. And he just like stopped like fucking Looney Tunes. And everyone just goes quiet for a second. And he just kind of shrugs. He's like, I'm off duty. And everyone's just like, oh, all right. And just kind of goes on. And I think about that every single time I see that scene, which I guess was also like inspired by real life. And I can absolutely see that happening because Lord knows, like, I can imagine a lot of cops that I've met over the course of my life who probably wouldn't want to like see a bunch of heavily armed dudes like, no, I'm going to look over to the traffic detail I'm getting paid, you know, triple overtime for, and, you know, do that instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then did you also catch the guy at the very end who's giving the interview to the TV, like the TV news crew? It's just some really classic, like, you know, Boston cop speak. It's like, and then yeah. Like, you know, like the actual FBI guys are walking past and he's like, and then you know, and it's just this like big fucking like old Boston cop dude. He's like, and then I exited my car and engaged the perpetrator with, you know, small arms fire until I ascertained that the suspect had been, you know, defeated.
Until he was compromised to a permanent end.
Just like some just fucking perfect shit.
Yeah, and like I just love the kind of, if we were to actually talk about the movie, like that whole sequence, the Fenway Park sequence is just phenomenal. Like from them showing up in the uniforms to the exit to like Jeremy Renner like walking away and when he like is shot and he's like on the ground, he just picks up the coke off the ground, takes a sip, and he's like, "Fuck you."
Throw down your weapon. Fuck you. I mean, similarly, like I was, my favorite time I ever got clocked by a cop for speeding was driving down Soldiers Field Road in Brighton once, and the statey pulled up next to me in his cruiser and just over the loudspeaker just yelled at me, "Slow down!" and then just kept on driving. I was like, all right. I just feel like I got scolded by Towny Dad. But going back to what you're saying with the accent thing. I mean, you know, it's like that whole scene, and like the one thing that I really get out of it is Affleck right there reminds me of his character from Good Will Hunting more than anything else.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about the way that he sells that dialogue that just like every single time it just makes me think of like that character in Good Will Hunting. Because it's just like a little bit over the top in kind of a cartoonish way. It's like, we just need to ascertain everyone who may or may not be involved here. So I'm just going to need to see everybody's ID. He's got like his hand on it. It's like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, I need to see your ID. My partner needed to see your ID. Let's go. And it's just like, the whole thing is just, it's fucking perfect.
You know, there is like that fantastic kind of juxtaposition of like their crew versus John Hamm, and like, you know, people, I suppose people from, you know, Boston probably look at like John Hamm as like, oh, he's some like college dickhead who like went to college, joined the FBI, and now he's like, thinks he's better than us, you know, fuck him.
Well, there's that. And I mean, it's also, and you know, this is something which I feel kind of, I don't know about the Garda where you are, but I imagine it might kind of resonate kind of, you know, in the larger history of Ireland. But the biggest, you know, police story for the last, you know, 40 years was the FBI colluding with Bulger, you know, when he was the, you know, the gangster head of Boston, and, you know, kind of letting him get away with, you know, a whole string of murders and everything. And so one of those, you know, movies like this kind of, even as much as it is this kind of typical, like you're trying to root for the one good, you know, criminal, and then you're rooting kind of against the vaguely scummy cop who's like taking advantage of, you know, this, you know, Ben Affleck's, you know, girlfriend, or, you know, his baby, you know, baby mama or whatever. But the whole thing about it is too, is, you know, you kind of do have this undercurrent of like, no one here really ever quite trusts the feds.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, and part of that too is, you know, and even now, I mean, after the Marathon bombing, for instance, I mean, there's been a whole host of, I think there was a documentary that just came out about, you know, what if the FBI had actually investigated one of the Marathon bombers, and why did they get away with like a quadruple murder, you know, a few years before the bombing, and kind of nothing seemed to happen with them.
It could be something that we're going to talk about on a future episode.
Yeah, right in. So I don't know. I mean, like that's always one of the things that kind of, you know, is a very, you know, it's kind of like the complicated relationship that a lot of people of my generation have with, you know, the church in Boston, you know, having grown up during, you know, the kind of dawn of the church abuse scandal here with, you know, Father Gagan and the rest of it. And so it's something that's kind of, it's there in the subtext when you're watching it. I don't know if it always translates to kind of everyone else who, you know, might be watching it in other audiences.
Yeah. And I think if we're kind of to bring it to a close, like on like a top level thing, like what does this say about the Irish American experience?
You know, I mean, I don't know. I would say it doesn't necessarily say anything by itself, but I think it's a good introduction. You know, I think it's a good introduction into kind of some of the types of guys that we're going to see over and over again. It's a good, I guess I would say it's a good table of contents, to you know, the Boston Irish guy in particular, but then the kind of, you know, overall, relationship between, you know, the Irish American guy and his, somewhat reluctant relatives, across the pond 150 years ago.
But the funny thing is that I think one thing that really translates across both Ireland and in this movie is even at home, like people have like a fierce loyalty to their family. Like I've seen families like really go to bat for, you know, their kids, their cousins, second cousins, you know, their cousins' wives, their kids, for anything, and really, really like stick together. And I think that is something about the immigrant experience, that we're kind of all in this together, and you can't rely on, you know, the cops or other communities or the government for sure to look after yourself. You got to look after your own.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I mean, I know that I've ragged a bunch, and I've said that a lot of this is just kind of, you know, a lot of the Irish American experience is just a reproduction, but there are through lines there, and there are like parts of that are definitely, you know, you know, I know you said before that, you know, looking at, was it the younger guy, the younger redheaded guy, who's the member of the crew,
yeah,
you know, and he looks like any like number of dudes that you could see walking down the street. And I know like the couple of times that I've been over to Ireland, I see, you know, 5 different dudes who look like they could be my grandfather. You know, I mean, there is kind of the certain amount of that kind of, you know, that physical appearance, that kind of like, you know, the gene pool that kind of persists, you know, whatever. And I think that, in the same way, I think some of those kind of societal, bonds and, you know, links also do reproduce themselves, even if a lot of the window dressing around is fundamentally bullshit.
Well, like that, it's funny you mentioned like looking like your grandfather or my cousin or something like that. The Irish have this. It's kind of like gaydar, but for other Irish people, it's called. You look at someone, they have a big Irish head on them, big fucking Irish head on them, and it's just something we'll never get rid of. No matter how much you try and get rid of it, you'll never get rid of it. You'll have a big fat head on you, big spud eating head.
Yeah, I mean, as a Mr. Potato looking motherfucker myself, I can testify to the fact that I have to special order my hats through the internet because my head's so full of dreams. So I suppose I suppose you're not wrong there.
And I suppose, Shocks, if we're gonna plug our shit, where can people find us?
All right. Well, so you can find me at Shocks. You can find me at Hell of a Way to Die, and you can find me at Lions Led by Donkeys.
Listen to the Romecast.
Yeah, listen to the Romecast. Listen to the homies. Listen to the Romies. And Tom, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at gotit@Guineys. That's GUYNEYS. I also host a podcast about the history of tattooing called Beneath the Skin. It's with a really cool academic called Dr. Matt Lauder, who is like phenomenal art historian. We talk about the origins of tattooing in the New World, all over the world, and we're moving on now to the modern era where we're going to be talking about famous tattoo artists, freak shows. We're doing an Ink Master series soon, so check it out.